Harvard Law wrote a paper last year that has actually classed, we often hear of zombie companies, and zombie companies being companies that are functioning but are not making a profit. So they have some huge debts. And these zombie companies, we often hear, are always on the brink. But what Harvard Law wrote a paper about was, and it's a very small paper, and it positions that if an organization doesn't have purpose, and by purpose they mean sort of sustainability as well, or large profit, then they're already dead company walking, basically. And so and what they posit is that a lot of these organizations may not have realized that, but that a lot of the investment community have realized that. So if you have the money to throw, if you're a big organization, obviously this is going to come at you harder and faster because your overheads are so much bigger, and your reach in terms of negative environmental impact is so much bigger, and therefore your vulnerability within that space is greater. And so, and also you have shareholders that will be starting to push pressure down as they look at what they would class as a risk within their portfolio. And so when we look at these organizational structures, what we understand is there's this window, and so this time that you're talking of, this time pressure, that now is the time to do it. For large organizations, they're almost playing catch up. So I interviewed Richemont, which owns Cartier, or they are custodians of Cartier and Baume & Mercier and Chloe and these big sort of luxury brands. And they obviously look after brands that have, a collective age of 2,000 years. And these brands, there's a huge burden of responsibility when you're a custodian of a brand with that history, and you're very much looking to the future and understanding, not on my watch will this organization, falter. And there's a very big board pressure for that, not just for those quarterly returns, but for the longevity of that brand's shelf life, and making sure that it's respected far into the future. So a lot of these brands, because they stand on this history, they're also future thinking all the time. And so they've been working on sustainability for 20 years, or 10 years, 5 years, depending on the organization. They might not have been shouting about it, but they will have been looking at it. And so large organization, and we know that Marks and Spencer's has been working on Plan A for 20 years. I think they just celebrated that anniversary. We know that a lot of organizations have, Sainsbury's have been in the space of sustainable fishing, for instance, and sustainable products that are more affordable for a while. So they're sort of finding their USP, whether it's at the luxury end and making sure that it feels both responsible to the longevity of the brand's life expectancy, and also finding a USP in terms of, well, we're going to make affordable sustainability, whichever those USPs are. But then if you look at someone like Tesco's hadn't spent a lot of time visibly, whether they had been talking about it in the background and not promoting it, we don't know. But Tesco's this last year, can't believe we're into 2022 already, last year announced that they wanted a carbon reduction plan in place for all of their supply chain. So anyone supplying to Tesco's will need a carbon reduction plan in place. It doesn't sound like a big thing, but actually what that means is anyone supplying to Tesco's will need to be considering their carbon. And it's not good enough to say we'll be carbon neutral by 2050. What they want is a plan, how you're going to reach that. And that's a very complicated thing to bring about if you're going to do it properly. I mean, it can be done, absolutely, and there's lots of ways that we can do that, and we're going to work with you, hopefully, on that as well. But it takes some thinking, and the bigger and the more complex the organisation, the more time that's going to take to just get the baseline assessments in place, apart from anything. And so Tesco's have used their might, if you like. They've done the same as you and realised, actually, now's the time we need to do this. And they hadn't been working on it previously. They hadn't figured out their USP, but they have the clout to push it down the line. And so that's what they've been able to do. They've sort of said, if we're going to get ahead of this, we need to look at the low-hanging fruit, the quick wins. How do we do this? And that's the quickest win, is to push it down their supply chain. And so that's what they've done.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what we highlighted really, because and a lot of businesses will support larger organizations. We're part of a supply chain for some of our work, and that was one thing that we highlighted pretty much straight away, was that they haven't done that. They haven't forced it at the speed that Tesco are, but it will. They're a very large organisation. They will start to look at doing that. And in the next couple of years, if we don't have a plan in place, we're going to lose work. We're not going to be eligible for some of this business because they just can't work with us because of what they've put in place. So I think, again, although it feels like it's a long way away, I know that you were saying there, some of the legislation that's coming in may seem it's all about big business and forcing them, but they're going to essentially get their plan to a point where they're net zero. If we're looking at carbon, they're going to have to force everybody in their supply chain to have a plan as well, aren't they? And if we don't come along for that ride, we're going to get left behind. So, and somebody will fill our void.
Yeah, and to be honest, we spoke to a number of clients about this last year, and we tried to make this understood better. And I think there's a notion with organisations, depending on size or maybe the industry that they're in, that we're not really talking to them. And I think the warning shot I would send now is this applies to every organisation, regardless of size or industry. This isn't something that is just the responsibility of oil firms, for instance, or heavy industry emitters. This is going to be important to everyone. Of course, the heavier your emissions, the faster you need to resolve it. But what we also know is that so someone like Microsoft, for instance, that announced that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2050, I think, or maybe 2040. They announced that they started looking at getting a carbon reduction plan in place. And exactly as you've just said, that carbon reduction plan for them will absolutely push it down the line, because they can't get there without. I mean, we'll talk more as we go along about the different scopes that we have for carbon, for instance. But you can't get to carbon neutral, carbon positive, without putting it down your supply chain. And some of that is might seem like a big burden for those suppliers to take on, and in a lot of ways it is. And that's why we really champion what you're doing at Dale Interiors, because you're not trying to go on this journey on your own and push the pressure down the supply chain. You're doing the reverse of that. You're trying to push the knowledge down the supply chain so that everybody can come on the journey together. And we really, really do need that to happen, on a global scale. And so when we're looking at someone like Microsoft, they've put this plan in place, they'll have done the assessment, and the assessment period can take a long time. So the Victoria and Albert Museum, for instance, appointed a sustainability director or manager, I can't remember, a year ago, and it's taken them an entire year to bring out a plan. So that's not even their report, that's just saying, okay, this is where we've identified that our negative impacts are and where we could possibly have a more positive impact. It's taken them a year to draw up that plan, and that's with someone working on it, or a team of people working on it all day for a year. That's across the spectrum of sustainability. And so these things take a while to put in place, but what we know is once they're in place, the rush to set goals and reach them is the next phase. And so what you want is, by the next time you make your plan, and then for your report, you want to have gains. You want to show that you've improved. And the quickest way of doing that, if you don't have the option in-house, is via your supply chain. So very quickly we will see if you're in a supply chain to Vodafone or Sky or the National Health Service or the government even, or Microsoft, you will see that they will require, as part of the bid process, a carbon reduction plan. And so when you're saying that it will start to affect Dale, it will, because if anyone is then in a supply chain to Vodafone, well, your carbon becomes their carbon, so they're going to want you to reduce your carbon as well. So it will, the quickest way is to weed out the heavy weight that the supply chain is carrying, and that will filter down.
I think that was the main thing, was that yes, there are risks, and that's one of the biggest pulls, but there are opportunities when it comes to working with this. And I think that was the thing that it hit us immediately because of the risks, and it will do as a business. But then when you start to look at it and think about it a bit more rationally and actually investigate it a little bit more, there are a lot of opportunities for a business when you're doing this type of work and when you're looking at this problem internally, and you can definitely you can offset the risks and also benefit at the same time. So I think that is a really positive thing to really hammer home, really, from both of us.
Absolutely. And the one thing I would say is that delay tactic, that denial about climate change, all of those that have been so damaging to the narrative, don't let that become the strategy for your business, because we now know, we identify very clearly the future is going to be a sustainable strategy future. We know that that's happening in government, possibly not fast enough, depending on where you are around the world. We know that, COP, the IPCC report, COP26, we've got COP27 next year. Let's hope we'll have some more advances from there. Fossil fuels were first in 2021 put into the papers to say that fossil fuel are part of the, are the problem, and so we need to reduce them. It didn't go as far as we'd like that phraseology to go, but it's a start and it's a significant one. And so what that says is that, the doors are, the stable door's open now. It's no longer a question, it's open. So it just depends how quickly you're going to get there. And so don't delay with your strategy. And it's a very wise one to start, even if you don't understand it, to start to navigate what it could potentially mean for your business and where the opportunities are for businesses, because we all need to shift to a sustainable future. One way or the other, it's going to come down the line, whether that pressure is, we've seen the gas price increases for domestic use in the UK this week, and that's not going to stop. It's been disproportionately supported and lobbied for, and so as we transition, there are going to be some big bumps in the road in terms of it being more expensive. The government will need to support that transition. Otherwise, there'll be so many choke points, none of us will get there. So they will be costing in how they support that transition. But we just can see these as red flags that this is where industry's going, definitely, and where homes are very, very likely to start going soon. The government, in the same way we speak about that supply chain, we're part of the government supply chain, and the government has to reach the Paris Agreement, and it's not going to get there unless it pushes the pressure down the supply chain to every home, to every business. So if we know that's happening, although I spoke to somebody yesterday and I said, the government's going to want, they're a property developer, and I said, but they retrofit properties, and I said that the government's going to need to push that there's no gas boilers, for instance, everyone. And they said, well, that's not going to happen for a few years yet. And I said, well, it's not, but what you'll do if you fit a gas boiler now is you'll be fitting something that's a liability very quickly. So it's worth you investigating it now. There's probably funding available, or it may be that you can wait a little bit and get the funding, or just dig into the knowledge a little bit around what support there is for you to do the right thing now, rather than have to do that U-turn in a couple of years' time where you're left with an asset that's no value whatsoever.
Yeah, no, totally agree.